born in Liverpool, England, 1944. Before I went into the service, I was kind of hitchhiking around the country. I had worked in a steel mill. I had been a student at Memphis State and was in a fraternity, more like an Animal House fraternity kind of a deal. And then I was down in Mexico, and I'd heard that if you want to go into the service, if you volunteer, you have to spend 3 years. But you could volunteer for the draft and only spend 2 years. And being a stupid kid who was adventurous, I wanted to experience war. I was in the Army. I was in the 101st Airborne. And I volunteered for the draft, and I volunteered to get into Special Forces, so I volunteered to get into, plus I found out you made the extra $50 a month for being in Special Forces, and I thought, wow, Airborne guys are going to get some special training. Ha! Special training to go get killed, basically. We were the crack troops that were supposed to go in, and we were the ones that were going to go in where the real bad stuff was. I was trying to get into the Special Forces, and if you volunteered, if you had 18 months left after your basic training and advanced training, you could get into the Special Forces, but as kind of like a helping the Special Forces. Because I went to a Special Forces camp when I was in Vietnam, and you had people there who were trained, took the South Vietnamese indigenous army out and was running around out in the jungle. And then you had guys who stayed back at the bunkers to make sure that the home base stayed good. Because I thought that would be the more adventurous and the more trained to survive in the more adventurous things. You would be down with the nitty gritty. When I graduated in basic training, I was one of these. There was like 4 or 5 of us. They marched out to try to get us to sign up to go to rocket school and officer school and all these other kind of schools. But you had to sign up for 2 more years, and I really wasn't suited for peacetime military. I was a little rebellious, I guess you would say. So the Airborne, you didn't have to sign up for anything extra, and I thought I'd have 18 months left after my basic training. And when I graduated basic training, I got in the military. They grade there's a number for everything you do, and I wanted to be in the infantry, but I must have did good on tests. My MOS was Signal Corps, and I told my drill instructor, I said, I want to be in the infantry. I want to really get to the nitty gritty. And he said, I would cut off my left arm to be in the Signal Corps. So I was glad I did it, because I did get to do the infantry, because we would get dropped on a hill and we'd have to do patrols around our hills to make sure we weren't getting snuck up on at nighttime. And I got to go out with the LRPs, the long-range reconnaissance troops. I got to go up in little fact planes fly around and do that kind of stuff when one of our outfits would be too far away to have radio contracts. So I got to do a lot of things instead of just walking in the jungle for 30 days with the pack on my back looking for stuff. Because where we were, they would come to us because we were sitting on top of a hill as major targets to get attacked. I was a radio operator, but not like I did go into the field with a radio, but mostly I was on a hill communicating. Like when we'd take off in helicopters, we would break off from the main force and we'd land on a hill to communicate back to the guys, the battalions who are out there searching for the enemy. We would send their signals back to the forward base. We might be 10 miles away. And when Vietnam in those days, there weren't roads. When we went out into the jungle, there was nothing there. The only way you got there was by helicopter. So we would transmit their messages. If they were under attack or whatever, we would be transmitting those messages back. And we would usually either have, like at a fire base, that would be our security, or sometimes we get a couple of platoons from an infantry outfit that would build bunkers around where we were, so that would be our security at nighttime and stuff like that. Those were the guys you would have a couple of guys get killed, and you wouldn't really know who they were, except, that was Buddy or something like that, because they were not our guys. They were guys that were on the perimeter. When I went over, it was just the 1st Brigade. They hadn't sent the whole division over, because this was 1966. This was early in the war. And if you know the Vietnam War, it changed year to year to year to year. We would be the first ones in an area, and I know the news media made us out as the bad guys, but in reality, the South Vietnamese people who had run away from the North Vietnamese when the North Vietnamese took over the North had come south, because they were mostly Catholics. A lot of them were Catholics, and they didn't want to be communists. So they were really anti-communist. But I was mostly in the Central Highlands, and we were called the nomads. We went all over Vietnam. Wherever there was trouble, that's where we went. So wherever there was some indication that there was a high count of North Vietnamese Army guys coming in, we were the ones that he thought we would get in there and do some damage. One of the cool things I got to do was if we had alert long-range reconnaissance patrol, they got too far out and you couldn't communicate them, we'd jump into a little FAC plane. A FAC plane was the planes that were like a Piper Cub. They would shoot rockets to the jets to let them know where to shoot to come in for bombing runs. But we would just go out there and establish communications with somebody we'd lost communication with. So we'd be flying around out there. And I had a guy one time, a FAC pilot, he says, hold on to the stick. Okay, so it was just a two-seater little plane. It was like a Piper Cup. And I was holding on to it, and all of a sudden he's hanging out the window with his camera. I'm going, what the hell? And all of a sudden, I swear, we're less than half a mile away, a B-52 strike just went right through the jungle. It was so cool. I mean, it was just, because we used to call it rolling thunder when we were when I was on the ground, because the ground would shake as these B-52 strikes would come through. It was like we don't have half the cool stuff that they have nowadays, because we just wore shirts and, shirt, that was it. a shirt, and we had a rifle. That was pretty much it. We were General Westmoreland's crack troops. My only long-range reconnaissance troop, they needed a radio operator, so I went out with them, was to go to a small village that we knew was a Viet Cong village, and to sneak up and check and see if any NVA were coming there at nighttime, to infiltrate, and because they would come in and indoctrinate the people and then kill anybody who didn't want to be a communist. If there was a leader there who was saying, well, we don't want to feed you, or we don't want to believe this, or if there was a teacher or something like that, they would pretty much chop his head off. So we were there to watch and see it. I spent like a week just hiding up in the bush there, looking to see if any North Vietnamese came into there. But we were if you're aware of Vietnam, I was from Con Tum to Doc Pho to Phan Thiet and all places in between, and a lot of it in the Central Highlands. When we were out there, when we would be on a hill, at nighttime is the most scariest. You could call in the artillery to what we did. We call, when we had an attack coming up a certain hill, we'd already had designated spots around our hill, so that all we'd have to do was, 50 meters from this spot, we need a fire at will kind of thing, and then you just shoot like crazy in there. But an artillery base would shoot 2 105 artillery pieces, so that if anybody was sneaking up on us, they would try to stop them from doing it. But they would also support if we got attacked. I was on a hill one time, and you could hear the North Vietnamese coming. We were close to the border. You could hear the North Vietnamese trucks coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You get a call, do you have any troops around so-and-so and so? We had little maps with grids on it. And we'd say no, and they'd go, and then about 5 minutes later, all hell would break loose over there with, artillery and all things blasting where those trucks were. And then about 2 hours later, here come those trucks again. It would only take them a couple hours to get through it. It's not so much the dying, it's the being poor dudes that get injured. Because everybody says, okay, if I get my legs blown when they're going over, if I get really hurt bad, just shoot me. But actually, when it happens, the guys going, don't let me die, kind of like. The Vietnamese people were mostly on the coast and in the Delta. I think the highest concentration is down by Saigon in the Delta. And we were up where the indigenous people were. They were basically like Indian people. And those people, the Vietnamese didn't like them because they looked down on them because, they were like in loincloths with bow and arrows pretty much when we first got in country. But they were on our side because they didn't like the North Vietnamese army coming through the Central Highlands, because they were hunters and gatherer kind of people. So we had the indigenous people on our side. As a matter of fact, now I send money to a mountain yard village orphanage over in Vietnam right now.
First impression when you first got there?
Heat. I walked off a plane. We landed in a base that was north of Saigon, and as soon as that door opened, it was like just walking into an oven. At that time, where the 101st main base was, and that was at Phan Rang. And at Phan Rang, it was basically a swamp. We had tents and rats running all over the place. And from there, we did like a week of training, jungle training. And then from there, I was gone from the main base of the 101st at that time. We were gone for like 10 months. When I came back 10 months later, They had barracks, they had roads, they had flush toilets, they had a PX. It was like being in the United States. It was so strange because we were, living out in the jungle all the time. And I decided I had to extend for like a month to get it early out, because if you came back and you had more than 3 months service, you got sent to a base. But if you had less than 3 months, you could come back and you would discharge. So I only did 21 months in the military. I extended, and when I extended, I figured, well, hell, I don't want to get killed now. But my last month was going back to do medical stuff and stuff like that. Because when you come back to the States, I thought, I came back into Fort Lewis, I think it was. And you would think you get some kind of a physical, because you're places where there's all kind of diseases and stuff like that. You thought, well, they'll check you out, get a blood, draw blood. It was more or less, do you want to re-enlist? No. Well, there's the door. So they don't give you any physical or anything like that. So that was that. That was my discharge from the military. A certain guy, it's up to your personality. Some guys, it's like you can be under attack, and some guys will jump into a foxhole and just shoot straight up in the air. That's why if you're aggressive and you put down a lot of fire on a location that's just there, if they're all sitting in their foxhole shooting up in the air, you can just walk up and kill them. So the whole thing of an attack is you put so much fire on the place where you're going that you get a lot of guys scared, and you got to stick your head up and shoot back, because dudes can just walk right up and kill you. So you get a thrill, obviously when it first happened, you have so much adrenaline going through your body because it's cool. And you have to fight back and all that sort of stuff, and it's a real high. I mean, for some people it destroys them. I guess it doesn't. I think I might have been a little suicidal probably, because I figured I didn't think I was going to make it through the war, to tell you the truth, and I kind of dug it. The only thing you don't like is when you're sleeping at night in a foxhole, and all of a sudden everything starts shooting, and grenades and mortars are going off around you. You go, I'm sleeping. I'm trying to get some sleep here. I don't want to wake up to this. So at nighttime, if you're asleep, it's not bad. It is bad if you're awake too, because nighttime is the worst time. But if you're sleeping, it's really like, oh man, come on, give me a break. Plus at nighttime, if you have flares, we had hand flares that we could pop off, but they were just little ones. They might stay up in the air for about 2 or 3 minutes. But artillery, which I just don't understand how artillery works, they could shoot big flares that would explode above us, and the big parachute with a flare would come down, and it would stay up there for 5 or 10 minutes maybe. But the flare is going like this, so everything out in front of you is moving too with the shadows. So you can't tell if that bush is a bush or if that's a dude there, or what's going on, kind of like. So you don't know what's happening. So nighttime is the worst time, no matter how you do it, because you're just you're looking out there, and you're looking at a jungle maybe 20 feet from you. You don't know what the hell's there. You're out. There's not a road next to you. You're in the middle of nowhere. So, and you don't know if it's 5 guys trying to kill you or 500 guys. And on the hills we were on, we might have 30 guys. If 500 guys, we'd be dead in like 2 minutes. I got one picture of this guy on a hill, and we were in the Central Highlands, and he's pouring some whiskey out, and he's saying, if they attack us with 100 guys, we're dead, so here, have a drink. I was in the military for 21 months.
21 months.
So I was in Vietnam for a year and like a month, a year and 3 weeks, whatever had to extend. So when I came back, I would be discharged.
And how did you return home?
I came by a jet. I came out of Cameron Bay. I got on a jet and came home. This is kind of weird. I came back, and it's really strange from living in a foxhole and no toilet or anything like that, and you come back to what we used to call the world, and there's cars and toilets and people going around in regular life, and there were people that didn't like us. And I went down to San Francisco to see if this guy that I knew got wounded, and I was seeing if he survived or not. There was a place in San Francisco called the Presidio, and I think there was a big hospital there. So I went down there. I flew down to San Francisco from Seattle, Fort Lewis is around Seattle, and I got drunk, and I was just walking on the streets of an American city is so strange when you've been living in a real primitive world where people are trying to kill you. And I was walking around, I got drunk, and this dude, I was on a bus, and this guy sat down next to me and said, "You better watch it, there's people watching you." And all of a sudden I got paranoid. Because when you're living with an M16, which is a machine gun, and you got grenades and stuff like that, and all of a sudden you have nothing, you feel really kind of vulnerable. As a matter of fact, when I got back home, and then I couldn't find him in the hospital, didn't have any records, so I said, well, I'm heading home. So I flew to Denver, and then to reconnect with real world, I took a bus from Denver, a Greyhound from Denver to Memphis, just to feel America, I guess you would say. And even when I got home, I had to go out and buy a rifle, because you're used to being with that all the time. It's like you can't sleep unless you got one right next to you. So that was my coming back, and then I was in Memphis for about 9 months. I won't get into all that because it was kind of a strange adjustment period. And then I went up to Michigan to see a friend that was in the service with me, and he had great pictures. Because our cameras would get destroyed. Because when you're living like that, I think I went through 3 cameras. They just didn't last because things happened to them. And but he had great pictures. Man, I wished I had his pictures.
So have you remained in contact with anybody else from?
Yeah, unfortunately, I try, and I do that Facebook stuff, and well, I did see the one guy up in Michigan. I went up to Sagatuck, I think it is, and I saw him, and then we wrote letters back and forth because the guys I was with were all what they call RA. They had volunteered, so they went back to Vietnam, and we were writing letters back and forth to Vietnam, and somebody sent me a carton of what, and that kind of stuff. And then I heard that a couple of guys got killed, and I was going through that adjustment into civilian life, and I don't want to talk too much about that because it was a little crazy. Things happened, and so I got a little crazy there. So I kind of lost contact with everybody, unfortunately. I'd go on the internet and I do all that kind of stuff, put people's names in, but they don't exist anymore, I guess. Because you're old, people die. And I go, so many dead people, it's unbelievable. Wait till you get my age, you won't believe how many dead people you know. I never saw any bad things happen to the Vietnamese people. I love the Vietnamese people. And I never saw anybody do anything bad to even the prisoners. Nobody did anything bad to the prisoners I saw. So, but the people who are in charge now, when we came back, I would never tell anybody for years that I was in Vietnam. Because even though I felt like everybody had experienced, I soon realized that nobody in the country had experienced it. So I kept my mouth shut about it, because in those days, it's not like now when these dudes come home and everybody goes, thanks for your service. It was more like, you baby killer and all that kind of crap. And we had to come back with people flying the flag of the people that were killing us. So it was a whole different world than what it is now. And I kind of understand that, but they don't realize that those Vietnamese people did not want to be communist. The more freedom is the way I look at it, the better. War is stupid. You're there to kill as many people, the other people, they're trying to kill you. It's so primitive, but I guess it's like sex. Sex is primitive. It's always been there, and it'll always be there. And you're always going to have the adjustment coming back from a situation where you're seeing people get killed and people are dying around you and that. And you have to get it, you have to put it in a box and put it up somewhere and just let it sit there and don't let it come back.